My name is Dwayne Falconer, and today I will be the moderator. First of all, some house rules. I'm still noticing that some people haven't muted their microphone. We're about with 250 people in the call, so can you please mute your microphone? If you have any questions during the presentation, just raise your hand virtually through Teams or ask a question directly. I will be able to redirect the question to the speaker. For this week, our speaker is a former colleague of mine at Deloitte, Samira Zaker Soltani, a consultant at CyberLagom, and she will be given a presentation regarding privileged access management. So Samira, thank you for giving this presentation today, and the floor is yours for this evening.
Thanks, Dwayne, and hi everyone, welcome. Let me just share my screen. Are you able to see my screen now? Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, we're able to see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so today topic, I'm a freelancer at CyberLagom. So why is privileged access the #1 priority for CISO? At the end we can answer some questions as well when we have time. But for now, let's see what the takeaways will be. So mainly I will focus on privileged accounts, the privileged access, what they are, why are they so important. I hear a slight echo. Will you take care of that, Dwayne?
Yes, Debbie and I will do that, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so where do we find them, these privileged accounts? What is the CyberArk PAS solution that helps with that? And I want to give you a live demo. And of course, when you are thinking about privileged account management, the program setup, where do you start and how do you prioritize the onboarding roadmap? So let's start with a definition. What is privileged account? What are they? So the definition is any account which is exceeding normal access. So the normal users, but then privileged accounts always has higher access for systems, applications. Think about administrator accounts. But then when they will be compromised, they will have a high impact on the business. There are of course other definitions as well, but the high impact is key here because there is privileged accounts everywhere, and you want to focus on the high impact in the beginning. So, why are they important? In every breach that we see, there is at least the involvement of a privileged account. That is also the candies for the attackers. They want to gain access to the privileged accounts because with a normal account of the recruiter, for example, they cannot go into the other system, so they want the administrator account to jump into other machines. So privileged account, this is what the attackers want, and in every breach we see also the usage of it. Now the privileged access management, that is a tool to control these privileged accounts. And of course you want a solution that fits all. But putting PAM in place, it's not that we say completely removes all security.
ये नहीं कर सकती बेबी मत कर.
Sorry, someone is not on mute.
Yes, no, yes.
Thanks. So we are not removing completely all security like any other solution. It's a combination of preventing, monitoring, and responding. But with PAM in place, we do reduce and eliminate the impact as much as possible. Well, I said already, in every breach there is the involvement of privileged credentials. Well, 80% is one of the lower numbers I've seen in the various reports. 80% is being said by Forrester in 2016, but I also have seen numbers of 100%. Now, why is it important to manage your privileged accounts? Because, well, the attack afterwards, the cost to fix the breaches is much, much higher than what would cost to actually put in place a good privileged access management in place. Now, the difficulty with privileged access is that it takes companies really long time to detect that credentials have been stolen, 120 days in general.
Naar de 50.000 abonnees. Goed, Nio, het herstelt niet naar een flinke daling in
Thank you. Only this year, 1.8 billion credentials were stolen. So this is a calculation since 2016. It's above 11 billion credentials that has been stolen. So it's also very important that the credentials we manage, the privileged accounts, we keep on rotating, changing the credentials, the passwords of it, because the attackers keep on building up their database of credentials. Now let's build further on the definition that we started with. What are the types of privileged accounts? So we have privileged account, but of course we have the human side and the non-human side. So you have privileged accounts that is for the people, and you have privileged accounts used by applications, machine to machine, service accounts. Now for the people side, you have the personal privileged accounts, which has been put in place from the last decade, where there was before like a lot of usage of the admin and the root accounts, and during the audits it was recommended mostly to create personal privileged accounts. So now a lot of people have both a normal non-privileged account and a personal account, personal privileged account. So it's a bit of a headache for some of the administrators because they have like multiple privileged accounts to get to different systems. And also we have the shared privileged account. So we have the shared defined by system. So this, think about the built-in privileged account like root and administrator accounts that is built in Windows and Linux, and any other application has also a built-in account. And we have the custom shared privileged account. So these are the definitions mainly. Now let's build upon that a little bit further. Where can we find these privileged accounts? So here you see an overview where these privileged accounts are existing in all the different systems and applications, but also underlying servers, hypervisors, the infrastructure, the network devices, everywhere. So in general, there is a thumb number of how many privileged accounts are within your organization, and it's a humble number to say 3 times more than there are employees in the organization. And of course, it depends on the vertical that the organization is in. 3 times is rather the low numbers. It's somewhere between 3 to 5 times more than there are employees in the organization. So these accounts are everywhere, and of course the onboarding of all these privileged accounts into a PAM solution, it's quite broad. So for every organization, it's also very important to focus on what privileged account, which one is most important for you, which would have the highest risk. So in this case, it's also very important to think like an attacker and place yourself into the attacker's shoes and think of how does the attacker come into the organization. So where can you build the segregations, and the boundaries to make the life of the attacker as hard as possible. For us as the Blue team, that is what we have to do. As a sidestep into the personal space where you can more relate to the privileged accounts and how we have to manage it. I want to show you this example. So there is this website of Have I Been Pwned? If you go there, you can put in your email or phone number, and they keep on a record of all the credentials that have been spilled during the years, and also notify you nicely when you have been actually your email address or phone number comes into one of these databases. So in the past, I also got notified with my personal email address when I checked. So there were so many. If you're a bit active on the internet, somewhere there is an organization that has a breach, so you get up into these databases. Now, not every leak, the attackers are that nice to say where is the leak actually coming from. So when I looked up my personal email, I could not see which organization actually created had the leak, so I can change the password. So then I changed my approach, and instead of having one email address, I started having a domain of email. So one domain, and I changed the email address. Both the email address is now unique as well as the password. So in this case, I can see actually if there is a leak of some organization based on the username, I can see where that was. So for the whole domain, I have the notification. And you can see in this case, for example, FitnessPal had a leak a year ago, I believe, or two. So now I can actually see where the leak is coming from by making it all unique. This makes also, for me, it improves that if the attacker has my username password, they cannot just jump into some other organization that I'm also having an account to be able to use that to log in. Now, similarly, these boundaries we have to create within organizations. So you want to have boundaries making the credentials unique for going through one machine to another. So we want to do three things. We want to make the attacker not be able to get credentials off a machine. So harvesting credential when they are on one machine, not to be able to get any other credential. We also want unique credentials so that if the attacker has access to one of the machines, they cannot just jump into another, and definitely not to a higher, lower tier. So tier 0 is in general the domain controllers or accounts that give access to complete network takeover. So we don't want the attacker to be able to jump. And thirdly, we want to see if there is a privileged account, how this is being used. So those three main things we want to achieve. Now this you do best by creating boundaries, controlling the credentials, having unique username passwords. Username, of course, is not always easy to do for especially the built-in accounts into systems, but a lot of other times you can.
I'll have a look into it one moment.
Okay, no worries. So the domain controllers tier 0, that is, those are the highest importance. For each organization, you have to create and assess a list of the assets you have to make a difference between tier 0, tier 1, and tier 2. This is also what Microsoft recommends with the credential boundaries tiering model to put that in place. What is good to realize is that nowadays we have more and more of the DevOps toolings. So for example, a Jenkins server, they get a domain controller account. So basically a Jenkins application is also tier 0. So keep that in mind. Now the exercise that I said with my personal, of course, in an organization, we cannot do that manually. The attackers are using automated tools to do the attack. So as the blue team, we also have to use tooling to protect ourselves and keep the credentials hygiene. Now, there are several vendors in the market providing privileged access management software. And I have been fortunate to be for the last 2 years at CyberArk, part of the company, before starting as a freelancer and a partner of CyberArk. And so today I want to tell you more about the solution that CyberArk has for the management of the privileged access credentials, and also provide you with a demonstration. So CyberArk Portfolio is quite broad. They are already 20 years on the market. The core product I want to discuss today, because we also have limited time, of course, is the privileged access management, for which CyberArk has 2 flavors. One being the on-premise solution. So you can get the software of CyberArk and you can place it on any machine you want, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. Or you can go for the privileged cloud solution, which is that CyberArk hosts some of the components, most of the components in the CyberArk cloud, while there will be a connector on-prem for the organization to be close to the target machines and the users. Alero is also an interesting one, but I'll keep that one outside of this presentation. Okay, so for the core PAS, these products will cover around 80% of what you need in a privileged access management program to get hold of the privileged credentials. Now, how it works without the privileged access management tooling in place, at least most organizations, you have, as an administrator or as an application, you have the username, password, credential in your possession, and you go directly to the target machine that you want to. This can be the Windows server, Linux, or application, doesn't matter. And of course, we have nowadays a nice jump server on which, in many cases, there is a key pass or another solution for holding credentials. The users copy that credential, and then from there they jump on to the target machines to have administrator rights. Of course, there are downsides to this approach, which we can all imagine, so I'm not going to read out the downsides, and I want to show you the future solution. So when you have the privileged access management solution in place, what happens is that as a user or machine, you log on first to the PAM solution, CyberArk. Of course, with 2-factor authentication, because we want to know for sure who is coming in. And from there on, a second session is being set up by CyberArk to the target machine. So this ensures that there is a boundary and that the second session, is being set up by CyberArk jump server. And the jump server is hardened, so for the attacker, it's much harder to attack the jump server and get, for example, hashes out of it than the client machine. So I hope this is clear to everyone. Of course, I don't want to go into the details at the moment, but feel free to ask me in a different session or later on for the components, different components that CyberArk has. So, as I said, there are 2 solutions for CyberArk to have this core PAS in place. The left one, the core PAS, this is where you get the software. You can install it on your machines, on-prem, in the cloud, your choice. And on the right side, there's the privileged cloud. Now, the vault, that is one, the important one. There's all the credentials go in it. It's the heart of CyberArk, where every credential is separately encrypted. And there is a very distinctive role model to segregate access to each credential. And the PSMs, those are the jump servers of CyberArk. Now, what is important about CyberArk? Of course, these are the two solutions I'm selling. But with CyberArk in place, you have an enterprise-wide that you can that you know for sure that every use case that you have for credentials, for privileged access, you can use CyberArk for. So it's not only for the traditional accounts like username password of the privileged users, but also for the cloud application credentials and also for the DevOps tooling. Okay, so to make it a bit more tangible, as promised, I want to give you also the demo. Let me just go back to my demonstration screen. So, and then I hope it will all fall into place. All right. So you can see this, right? The CyberArk logo here, big.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So you are looking at the Windows machine of a user. So let's go to the CyberArk web interface. So this is what the privileged user, non-privileged user will go to CyberArk first to authenticate, and then from there on wants to set up a privileged session. And without going into too many technical part, I do want to share the look and feel of CyberArk and some of the basic functionalities. Of course, there is many more, and we can spend a lot of time on this, but we'll start here. Okay, so I'm going to log in as a simple, as a Windows administrator user. The lifetime is always tricky. So these are this is the look and feel. I can also create my favorites here. But this is basically John logging into CyberArk. Well, of course, in production, you have always two-factor authentication because you want to know for sure who is logging in. And from there on, John logging in with his normal non-privileged account can choose a privileged account to connect to the end target. So here I can use a admin, which is a domain account to, for example, connect to another machine. So let me, and I want to say it's a test. So now is the second session that is being set up, that is by CyberArk. This session is being set up for me without me seeing the password of this privileged account. So I do have the session, I can work as I need to, but I don't see the password of that credential to get into this target server. So let's, and the nice thing, maybe I want to show you that going through CyberArk, of course, now I am inside the server with a privileged account. So let's try to create a backdoor account. And the backdoor account, of course, let's create a new user. So let's say Isaka shadow user and give it a simple password. And we do not want it to expire. Of course, a user is nothing if it doesn't have the access rights. So let's also make it part of the administrator. So it's now local administrator account. So this would be instead to making a nice backdoor account. So this is happening while I am going through the CyberArk jump server and I am inside this session, right? Now, meanwhile, I have done that. I want to also show you that there is the possibility to have the threat analytics of CyberArk, which is part of the Core PAS solution, that is looking along with me inside this session. So if I start to, for example, start something like the firewall, which I have predefined as being risky, something risky, then the threat analytics of CyberArk kicks in and you see that my session has been suspended. Now, okay, so now I can click around here, but nothing happens because the session is suspended. But let's go back, and with another account, we go to CyberArk, so we can actually see from the other side, from the admin side, what happened. So let me create a new session. Just wanna. Oh, it's not clicking. Oh. Okay, so now I'm going to log in into CyberArk as Mike. Mike is both an audit user and he has also some more rights in my demo environment for the ease of it, so he can see multiple things. So let me just show you the security events that we just triggered by creating these shadow accounts and also doing suspicious activities. So this is the threat analytics kicking in. Showing here, well, there was some suspicious activity. The remediation has been already started, and the user John tried to go and started the firewall. So if we want, we can also go there and see what has been happening inside the session. And also, if we want, we can monitor the session, so we get to lively see what is happening inside the session of John. And we can also decide whether we want to terminate it or suspend it, which is already there, and resume it. So let's for now resume it, and then later on we can have a nice chat with John. The other security event that you saw here, the Izaka shadow, has been already detected by CyberArk, and the nice thing is we can have onboarding rules so that the remediation is already kicked in, meaning that this backdoor account that I created to be able to bypass CyberArk is already onboarded into CyberArk. So if I go to the list of accounts and I search Izaka, I have now a newly added account. And if you remember, I typed in quite nice, easy password, but let's show the password of this. So this is not what I typed in, but because CyberArk onboarded this account, it also immediately changed it. And now that I have chosen to show the account, it will also, again, plan this account to be changing the password. So this is based on policy. So another use case I want to show you is the ability that you don't necessarily need to always, as a user, go through the web interface. So this is for some of the administrators nicer. They don't want to always go through the interface, but as they are used with their own programs, for example, Remote Desktop Manager, to just go directly to the target machines. Of course, we still don't want the users to know the privileged account credentials and get the access using their non-privileged account, so that there is always a link between who actually used those shared privileged accounts. Now, as you saw me doing, getting a complete RDP session, we can do that. So, for example, John can instead of going through the web interface, we can go directly. What happens underneath is that we're still going through the CyberArk jump server, but using my John account, non-privileged account. While in CyberArk, I can say, okay, use the xadmin domain admin account to get me to this server. And this happens by a simple change inside the RDP session. So I also want to show you that we don't have to give the user the complete RDP, but we can also limit them to a application. Underneath is using the Windows remote app. So in this case, again, I give my non-privileged account, John. Of course, in production, there is again two-factor authentication. And what I'm going now, basically, I'm going against authenticating against CyberArk jump server and CyberArk jump server based on the parameters here, sets up the session to the target machine I want to. And of course, based on the access rights I have as John. So instead of having a complete RDP session, we can also limit the user to just have access to a connection, such as this one, which only shows me the program of Active Directory users and computers and nothing more. Now, especially for Linux administrators, this is also very necessary, that if they definitely don't want to go through the web interface, so that here you can show the allow them to still go through CyberArk, so still as a secure session, but then being able to use their own tooling, such as PuTTY or WinSAP. So normally you put here the IP address, but what happens now is we put here the non-privileged account. So in this case, I am Paul. I want to use the Firecall account or root account, and I want to go to the Linux machine rel 7, and I'm going to go through the CyberArk jump server. So instead of having an IP address here, these are the parameters I'm giving to the CyberArk jump server, and the CyberArk jump server sets up the session for me to the rel machine. So let me give my password, two-factor authentication in production. And now you see that we are going through the CyberArk jump server, and I am becoming the Firecall account in this machine without seeing the password or SSH key for the Firecall account. So I can also not go outside of CyberArk to here. So because we have 250 users in the webinar, I suppose it's a bit tricky to ask if there's any questions, but I will take questions at the end. But I hope this gave you a look and feel of how CyberArk is for these basic use cases for now. I'm going to go back to the presentation. That was the demo. So, okay, of course, I showed you the landscape of where privileged accounts exist, where they live. All the applications, all the servers, all the machines, they all have a privileged account, at least one. So where do you start when you are planning a privileged access management project? There are various tools, of course, on the market, but from CyberArk, there is two tools I would highly recommend. One of them is a scanning tool, and the other one is a guideline for planning the onboarding process. Prioritizing your onboarding of accounts. So let's start with DNA first. It's a scanning tool. which gives you more insight into the Windows, Unix accounts that you have, and it's very lightweight to run. You get a Excel sheet with the accounts there of the privileged accounts that you can then use for various reasons. One for planning of the project, one for doing a cleanup process, and also for recurrently you can of course scan DNA. DNA is something that is both in CyberArk Core PAS, but because of easy to use, and also before you have CyberArk implemented, you can use this tool to do the cleanup, but also project planning. Now it is
Samira,
not
just minor interruption. Would you prefer any questions directly or all the way at the end? Because there are a few questions coming in.
all right. Let's take a couple.
Robert Bloem, you're able to unmute your microphone?
Hi, I'm wondering how you would implement the envelope procedure in CyberArk.
The envelope procedure, there are a couple different envelope procedures. So do you mean the approval process?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so that is very easy actually, because let me see. I am here logged in as John. So for some accounts, I do have the access to actually connect directly, but you can also put this under an approval process. So let's see, here there is one already. So here, for example, I have to go through an approval process before I can actually get the connection. And we can do that also for the password. So for some, I can, well, this one, unlucky. For some, I can see immediately the password. And for some, there is a approval process over it. So I have to go through a request for show. I have to give a reason, the time frame I need it for, whether I need it multiple times or not. And I can actually see also who is in the groups to give me the approval. And then after sending the request, I can actually set up the connection or see the password. And you can have 2 levels of approval also. So you can say there is the first group that needs to give approval and also a second group on top of that approval. So there is the tool is very flexible in that sense.
All right, thanks.
Welcome.
Okay. Dick Slot. I also know that you had a question in the chat. It's 10 minutes ago, but are you still willing to ask it?
Yeah. I had a question about whether the suspension of sessions, whether it is configurable or that it is already pre-configured in CyberArk.
So it's the threat analytics of CyberArk comes with a pre-configured list, but this is configurable. So you can add scenarios to it based on wildcards, based on the title of the window that is being opened or typed in, that you can say, okay, then it needs to be kicking in. So if you want to see it quickly, so I need Mike because Mike has all the rights. So here I have the security configurations. So here, for example, for SSH, if someone is gonna do Gmod, then we can say, okay, let's do a suspend or terminate the session. Terminate is not so nice. Suspend is better. And then you can have a nice conversation with the person.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. More?
No
Any
questions.
more lucky questions?
No.
All right. Let me go back to DNA. So DNA, very much I would recommend this one to run before the projects, especially to help with the project planning. during the project to see how far you're getting, and also for cleanup. It's a free tool. If you need help with running it, well, you can ask CyberArk, you can ask me, and we can also help with analyzing the results for you. Don't see DNA as a tool that should be covering all of the everything. So you should not stress for running it for the whole environment and that it should be a complete solution. But like as an auditor, you take a subset, and based on that, you can also know how the rest of the organization is. So you take a subset of the domain and you run the tool. And from there on, you can start prioritizing. You can start planning the project. Well, of course, there is also the difficulty of where to start, because there are so many privileged accounts, and one mistake of that is generally taken is that you get CyberArk, you get the tooling, so you're good to go, and you're done. But as in any other project, any other IT, you want to, as long as the organization basically has systems and applications running, you will have a continuous life cycle of privileged access management. So it's a never-ending story. Okay, so Blueprint is the guidelines that CyberArk came up with together with the red teaming, the professional service, and the experiences that they have to come up with a prioritization and recommendations of where organizations should be focusing on to onboard the accounts into CyberArk. The idea is to prevent the credential theft, prevent that the attacker gets some credential and then is able to move further into other machines. And of course, when you have a privileged account, what is actually being done with that? So the threat analytics, for example. The guideline is based on focus on the high impact accounts and the lower effort to create the momentum inside the project, which is very important. I have seen a lot of organizations starting with some very exotic use cases and legacy application. This is very blocking for the project, and also for the people inside the team, because it goes very slow, and then the onboarding of the accounts inside CyberArk goes even slower. So high impact, low effort, focus on the quick wins, and definitely not on the legacy and the exotic accounts. Okay, so Blueprint came up with a number of stages, 5 stages, with the first one being the most important one, securing the privileged accounts that would give the attacker complete network takeover. So think of this, the tier 0 accounts, the Windows domain administrators, the Windows Server local administrators, VMware hypervisors, and anything that would give entire or part of the entire network environment. So also, for example, if you have lots of machines running in Azure or AWS or any other cloud, the administrator account getting access to those cloud environments. After having those, you start focusing on the highest impact further, which is a lot of times the workstation local administrator rights, because this is where attackers come in mostly via some phishing mail, where at least 4% of the employees click on. So there's always some input for the attacker to come in. And there is Unix root, privileged Active Directory users. The Unix is not taken in the first stage because normally we see that Unix, these are the bit harder to convince group of users to get along for the onboarding of their privileged accounts. So you have to also be sure to have implemented the most user-friendly use cases. So for example, the transparent session I showed you, that you allow the user to go through the to use their own tooling like PuTTY to get the session. Well, the blueprint can help you create a roadmap for the PAM. So one of the examples for the roadmap is you put in place a number of phases, and based on what is the highest impact for your organization, you create a focus points. Now, keep in mind that most organizations, there is only a number of different types of accounts that you should be focusing on. There is a maximum number. So in general, there is 3-4 different types that an organization can take. So don't try to create a big bang effect, but mostly focus on creating a momentum into the organization for the project. Any questions so far? Well, this is for the creation of roadmap. Whenever,
Yes,
yeah.
Freddie Wolf. My apologies, I was on mute.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, my question is if CyberArk is in itself not a risk to become a super user or a domain admin, because you have the credentials, maybe you have the credentials of a domain admin user, and you are inside of CyberArk where you get access or connections to service. You don't have any passwords anymore. So I heard you say two-factor authentication and production. Okay, I think that's a good idea, but because it's all together in CyberArk, it has a risk in itself.
Yes, yes. So CyberArk becomes the heart of the organization, having all the privileged accounts. It is a security company, so all the components, all the CyberArk parts, the machines, they are hardened, secured. Of course, it stays a software, so we should not only rely on this part, but we also need network segmentation, we also need vulnerability scanning, and we also need patching management all together.
Yeah, but I meant if you are a normal user who have high access rights, it's in the functionality that you get access by this user, and then you can connect to all the services he may go to. When we don't have CyberArk, we had to have all the different passwords of the services of service. We need to know them, but when we at the single sign-on principle, if I'm correct, I don't know for sure, but I think that's maybe a risk in itself.
But how do you know if you, without CyberArk in place, when a user goes to use a root account, for example, you don't know who used the root account?
No.
And that is the part that CyberArk also solves, because you log in as, well, Samira logs into CyberArk, and then I choose to use the root account. So CyberArk keeps the full audit trail of Samira is using the root account. So we always know that which user used a shared account.
Yeah, it's the for monitoring purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But it's a risk if you have all the accounts in by a single sign-on principle.
Yeah, that's why there is a role-based part in CyberArk. So I didn't show you guys that part. Let me see if I can quickly do that. So for example, here I am John. You saw, of course, that there is a Paul user. So if I search root as a Windows admin, I don't see any. So I don't even see that the root accounts are inside CyberArk. Whereas if I log into the web interface as Paul, I do see those root accounts. So it is, of course, we should always keep the least privileged principle. So do not give the single sign-on to all of the accounts. So this is a demo environment. But John should not be able to see all the accounts, but only the privileged accounts that he needs for his work. And the rest will be inside a different safe inside CyberArk. So the safes that John can see, he can see the accounts for. So it's not a window access to all privileged accounts.
Last say about it. But if I'm a user who has high privilege, real high privilege on the tier 0, then I'm get in on his account and get direct access. But I understand what you are saying. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is much more control though over all the privileged accounts. So you have the prevention part that the privileged accounts have unique passwords based on policy that you set. You have the monitoring part and the threat that you can actually respond also within the sessions. Of course, it's all much more controls in place than without any. I see another hand, Peter.
Thank you. The CyberArk administrator, he can create accounts and he can give rights to them, the authorizations. But for example, let's say I have a company and I have Windows servers and I have Linux servers. And I want to have an administrator, a sub-admin for only the Windows. Is that possible in CyberArk?
So the administration of being able to add accounts and remove accounts or move people around, you can have that also as considered as a privileged account. So basically you can say that is a privileged account that I'm going to onboard in CyberArk. So if John wants to become the administrator to be able to create or add a privileged account into CyberArk, you can go through CyberArk so that also that usage is completely monitored and has audit trail. Now there is a lots of airbag inside CyberArk for role segregation. So the person that is managing the CyberArk software in the background has different access rights. So he can, for example, not use the accounts, whereas someone that, for example, John does not have any other of those settings here to be seen. So you can segregate all that.
And second question, in a company, the security officer gets a more important task. And is it possible for a security officer to have access to the CyberArk platform without having the possibility to change settings?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to just give everyone that the tool is very, very flexible because it's the leader in the market and also the there for 20 years, and all of these requests had been done before. So I'm logging in now as Cindy, which is my auditor role in this case. And you can see she does not have any connect button here or the ability to see or show. But she has, for example, the ability to see the monitoring and recording of what has been happened before. So, for example, we had the John session. Well, did not do much in that session. Let's check this one. So we can, for example, Cindy is the auditor, so she can see the recording, but she's not actually able to use the accounts. So there's various roles of this to cover all those use cases. Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so I think I can put my last screen. And if there's any other question, of course, feel free to ask, because I'm done with my slide deck.
Yes, there are some questions. Ramsey, regarding insights on the faults, availability, and disaster recovery.
Yeah, it's a quick question about if you can give us some insights about the vault, the high availability options, and the disaster recovery scenarios for it. That would be really great. Thank you. And then thank you so much. It's a great presentation.
You're welcome. Thanks. So the vault is the heart. That will be the holder of all the credentials, and within safes, every safe is encrypted separately, etc. Let's not get into that. But there are indeed disaster recovery faults, which you can have as a setting, how often, how quick you want it to synchronize, just a couple of seconds different, for example. Within the Core PAS license, there is the possibility to have 5 separate disaster recovery faults, which is quite on the high end. A couple of them will do. You can place them in different places. So, for example, on-prem, one in Azure, one in AWS, and that they communicate to each other and synchronize, so that you have high availability. There is also the possibility to put them instead of disaster recovery or combination. You can have a vault in a cluster as a high availability. And the same you can do for the CyberArk components, like the jump servers. You can put behind a load balancer and deploy as many as you want, so that the high availability is not a problem.
Another question from Pascal regarding the SaaS solution versus the on-prem solution. Pascal, would you like to ask the question directly?
Well, it's already said. Thank you for the presentation, by the way.
Sorry.
But it already said in the chat. You know, what's the difference between the SaaS solution and the on-prem solution, and why should I choose one or the other?
So the on-prem solution is you get the software and you can install it on your machines of choices. The benefit is that you have the vault in your own environment. So for some clients, this is top priority to have the vault on-prem segregated separately in a secure environment. Whereas for some other clients, they prefer SaaS solution only, and they don't want to manage the vault and the components at all. Also, they might not have the people for it. So in that case, the SaaS solution could be a better fit. The inside the SaaS solution, the vault, the web interface, and the threat analytics is inside the SaaS. And the jump server and the components that will connect to the target machines to change the credentials will be on-prem inside well, preferably 2 machines, of course, for load balancing, so that they are close to the target machines and the users. But then you don't have to update the vault and the other components that is being hosted in the CyberArk SaaS. So if you have the people to manage it and you have the requirement to keep the credentials on-prem, then there is the on-prem solution. But if there is a SaaS approach and it's okay that the credentials would be hosted in at CyberArk SaaS, that would be a great fit as well. CyberArk has enterprise customers also for the SaaS solution, and the certification that is required by most of the organizations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Samira. I'm also looking at the time. It's 8 o'clock, so I would like to thank you on behalf of Isaac and Noria. Thank you for your presentation on PAN. Yeah, on the others, for next week, we have a presentation on ISO 27701, which will be provided by Aish Yuvus and let me have a look, Jantine Senegal from both from Ernst & Young. So looking forward to you to seeing you next week. And everybody, thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you all for your